Welcome back to my YouTube channel, guys. Today we're going to be creating this environment in Blender as we already are. So without further ado, let's go straight into the video. So first of all, I'm going to hide everything so that we start from scratch. So now everything is clean and clear. We are in a plain view, no assets added, and yeah, we'll start from scratch to explain. So first of all, we want a human model, and that is just for scale reference. And then after the human model is done, we create our first plane, which is what is currently selected. This first plane, I call it the plane of action, or you can say the foreground slash midground, kind of a foreground midground. This plane is where all the action is going to take place. So this plane is going to be the most detailed, it's going to be the most detailed part of the entire scene. Yes, it's going to be the most detailed part of the entire forest scene. And then to kickstart it, well, first we'll go to object mode. That's what I did. Tab into object mode, and you can see I just subdivided it, and then I added a displacement modifier. If you look towards here, I added a displacement modifier, that's this up here, to displace it, to give it that ground-like feel. After this is done, there are two extra planes. This is I labeled it the midground, but this is just like this, what is just, this is going to be the next level of detail. This basically, the action is not happening here, but this plane is still going to be seen quite as much as you can see the main plane. So it's going to be like just a little details lower than the main plane. And then we have the background. This can have as few details or as few resolution mesh as possible, because this is just basically going to, this just is what is going to fill up the entire scene so that it looks highly populated and far into the distance. These are things here are barely going to be able to see them through the camera. So what I do when I'm creating an environment is my main plane, my plane of action, my foreground plane. What I do is that I first create it, I detail it to the taste I like, and then I just reuse the foreground plane to create the midground and the background. So we'll do that. So before we start into the assets, before we start into bringing in the assets and all, they are, for this environment creation and for most environment creation, you're going to need like an asset pack and all. But what I use for this one, I use Botanic for the vegetation assets, for the forest and vegetation assets, like the stones and everything. And then I use Scatter, the add-on, to scatter the assets on the plane. So Botanic for the Botanic add-on for the assets, and Scatter add-on to scatter the what do you call it, the assets on the plane. You don't really need this exact things to create an environment, but yeah, you need something that will make it easier. Let's delve into it. Let's go one by one. So let's go into Scatter add-on. As you can see here, we are currently selected on the main plane, which I call the plane of action. And the first asset I added is the grass. And if I unhide that, you can see I added the grass. This grass is highly populated, and you can see there's a path here. So what I did was, in the Scatter add-on, there's a place called column marks, and you can literally add a mask there to mask out where you want the grass to be or where you don't want the grass to be, depending on what you prefer. So I maxed out where I don't want the grass to be, and that's why you can see this red heat map. That's just basically, I don't want grass to be here because there is a path or a walkway, so I don't want grass to be here. And that is what was done here. So I added the assets, I populated the density to be this thick, and then I maxed it with vertex group, which is essentially weight painting. So I maxed it with weight painting to tell Scatter that I don't want this particular grass asset to be on this path. And that's basically how the grass is started. Let's see the rendered view. So you can see it's still basic. It's still basic. After the grass, sorry, there was something I forgot to say, which is before you create any environment, look at references. Look at references. So I'm creating this off a reference I did on Pinterest, which I'm looking at through my phone. So always look at references and have when you look at references, maybe I'll create a special video on how to reference. Yes. So anyways, look at references before you start and then create to the reference and you can add your own twist to it. So after the grass asset, next thing I added was moss. And the moss, yeah, let's just look at the moss individually. This is the moss. What I'm doing with the moss, as I've added the moss, is I have created another vertex group, which is weight paint, to tell Blender where I want the moss to be. So you could see in the previous one, I told Blender the red heat map meant I don't want it to be here, but here the red heat map means I want it to be here. And you can simply change that. If you come here, if you look at where the vertex group is, you can see this arrow. If I press it, it inverts it. If I press it, it inverts it. So I just painted this place red and inverted it to say, okay, this is actually where I want it to be, not where I don't want it to be. So that is basically what we have for the moss. And then that's the grass on the moss. You can see the grass and the moss together. Let's preview that. You can see it started to look more detailed because the moss now creeps into the main pathway as you will see in real life. So the next asset I added were a little flowers, and for these you can't really see them. You have to scroll. I have to scroll in for you to see them. These are white flowers, and I basically added them to this end. I basically added them so that they will be small. I didn't want them to come out so much that they won't be visually distracting. So let's just see the flowers on its own. After adding the flowers, as you can guess, I did the same thing. Created a calling mask and weight painted a vertex group so that the flower doesn't show up here. And you can see the flower is low density. What I mean by low density is this. If you go into the distribution, if I increase the instances, you can see I can increase how much it is. So for the grass is high density. The moss is high density because it's packed. But then the flower is really low density, and that is intentional because I just wanted to use the flower sparingly. So that's for the flower assets. So the grass, the moss, and the flower. Let's see how it's looking. You can see it's starting to look more, if you go from the camera point of view, it's starting to look more, like this. Now you can, if I populate the whole plane with this, it's going to look like an open wide grass field. You can see it's already looking like nice and all. So for the next asset, I called it plants, but I added these plants or these grasses that grow like plant grass, but they grow way above the normal grass. So let's just see that individually. You can see the plant grass. They grow way above the level of normal grass. They are really tall and high. So as you can guess what I did again, I created sorry, I didn't create, I reused the vertex group of the grass on the plant. And these plants too are kind of low density. They are not too much like the grass. So they are kind of mid density, not low. They are not as low as the flower, they are mid density. So these plants, I use the same vertex group I use for the grass, just to say, okay, where the grass where there is no grass, let there not be plants too. So, and yeah, that is basically. So let's look at it with everything on up to this extent. And you can see it doesn't really add much, but you see, it's the little things that matter. You may not really feel the visual implement, but everything helps to tie the source together. Yeah, everything helps to tie the source together, and that's really nice. For the next asset I have on this list is trees, but I'm going to go to S trees before trees because the way I'm taking it, S trees are meant to come before trees, but when I was creating I actually created the trees, and then I was like it still looks not visually dense enough, so I created S trees. So let's go to S trees first. And what these simply are just like small trees or bush scrubs or small trees. Those are what are contained in these assets, in the S trees assets. Yeah. So let's look at the S trees on its own. You can see how they are huge enough up to the waistline of the human model. So you can see we're now adding larger details before we are the small details. So the grass and the more small details, the flowers and the plants are kind of mid detail towards this S tree that's kind of is not entering into the larger detail. So when you're creating things, that's a tip for 3D arts. When you're creating anything in 3D, always make sure you have three levels of detail, whether it's in your textures, in your environment, in your model, everything. Just make sure there are three levels, like small, mid, and high level details, and that will just make everything look realistic. So we're getting into the high level details here, and as you can see, I also use the calling marks, a weight paint marks, to tell it that I don't want the trees in this specific area. And because you can see this is painted really much, because this is a high level detail, so I really wanted to control how it was seen. So that is basically how that was done. So let's add everything before this up to this extent, and let's preview it. As you can see, it's starting to look nice. So before I added these trees, this could have passed as a grass field, like an empty grass field. But now I've added these bush scrubs and trees here. You kind of feel like, yes, if this goes through the landscape, you're just going to feel like there's something missing. And yeah. So for the next asset, it's going to be the trees. So let's just add that. Yeah. And you can see our scene is already starting to choke. So this is like the thing that ties it together. So we have small, mid, and high level details now, and then the tree just ties it together to look like a forest, because trees are present in a forest. And then for these trees, for the tree assets, what I did in this scatter add-on, you can change the distribution here to manual. So instead of using a calling marks to like paint out where I don't want, because it's still going to do like a randomization. So blend the scatter pack or even blender particle system, when you paint out things, it's still going to do like a randomization. And I didn't like the randomization it was giving me, because it can have like two trees too close to each other in the way I didn't like. So what did I do? There's a mode called manual mode in the distribution while using the scatter add-on. So I entered manual mode, and what this enables me to do is I can hand place the asset where I want. So as you can see now, if I press, a tree comes. So I can hand place the asset where I want. So all these trees, as you can see here, were hand placed by me. Yes. And that's basically how I created the trees for this part. So let's go into the rendered view. Whoa, and as you can see, everything is starting to look beautiful, everything is starting to look clean, everything is starting to look nice. If this goes way into the distance, this can pass for a forest. But then there's one more asset we want to add, which are rocks. So these are just rocks, but another thing you want to do, you may want to add like rock, you want to add like broken storms, you may want to add like, yeah, all those kind of things. Just the thick assets, like the earthy assets, to kind of tie it in with the earth nature of the forest. So I just added rocks. And these rocks you can see I'm not using any calling marks, I'm just using them sparingly. So the density of the rocks are really low, so that they don't really appear much. So those are how I use the rocks. And then if we go into the rendered view, you can see the rocks just give it that little tie in, like it just ties it in. Without the rocks, the trees and everything looks okay, but the rocks just tight in. And if you add stuff like, as I've said, storms, line logs, and all these things, it's going to look very beautiful and fantastic. So basically, now that I'm done with my plane of action, which is my main plane, I have everything tied down, everything is looking nice, everything is to my taste. Now we go to the midground, and we can just change it here in the scatter, this thing, in the scatter add-on. We go to the midground, and what I basically do is I copy all the scatter systems, or the ones I need. So I copy some scatter systems from the main plane to the midground plane, and the scatter systems I copied were grass, moss, plants, trees, and ash trees. You can see I did copy flower because the flower is just to give this. It's not really a detail that was even showing up much in the main plane of action, which is the foreground. So in the midground, I'm not using that asset at all. I'm just leaving it, and I'm not using rocks because you can't really see the rocks in the distance here. It's just going to slow your system down for no reason. So let's bring them out. So the grass assets, as you can see, still the same thing with the calling mask. The moss, still the same thing. Everything is just copied straight from there. Everything is copied straight from there. Then for the trees here too, I told you guys how the trees worked in the previous one, in the main plane, the randomization and all that I didn't like. So for the trees in the midground too, I hand placed each and every one of them. For the trees in the midground, each and every one of them were hand placed, and then ash trees, as you can see. So let's see how it looks with the midground active. So you can see the midground still shows up quite a lot, and you can see now with the midground active, everything just looks now. It's starting to look like, oh yeah, this thing is something that looks nice. But then the final problem we have now is that there is a whole background, and we can see that this is where it cuts off from. This is where it cuts off from. Sorry. And then what the background is just basically going to do is just to fill in this whole place to make it look visually dense, while it's not really visually dense. So for the background, let's go there right now. You can see that everything is starting to lag. That's why I always create my main plane, the foreground, or where the action is going to take place, my plane of action. That's why I always do that first before I just start duplicating all the assets and making them look nice. So for the background, I only use two assets, and the first one is the trees. The trees are scattered randomly now because you can't really. So what the background, essentially the background is just like take it into the distance. So I just scattered the trees randomly. I didn't care about the pathway and everything and how it's going to look. So the trees for the background are scattered randomly. And then let's preview this first. You can see, but there is something still missing. If you look deeply into the background, you can tell that it's just soil that is here. From here, you can see still see like there's a cutoff. But then the trees the background trees are doing a very good job. So what did I add? I added the next high level detail, which is the ash trees, and I just scattered them randomly too in the background. So the background only has the trees and the ash trees. It doesn't have grass or anything because from that distance we're not even going to see it, and we're not even going to be looking to see it. So yes, and then I added the ash trees, and if we render that, you can see the ash trees just tied in. It just makes it look as if it's continuous. Before, without the ash trees, you could kind of visually tell that there's a separation from here with the background, but now everything just blends in well. And basically that's just how this forest environment was created in Blender, using botanic assets and scatter add-on to scatter the assets. So yeah, this was really fun. I thought this would be hard to explain, but the explanation actually went quite well. I hope this video does well. And yeah, if you like this and you want to see more kind of breakdowns like this, not like like you want to see more in-depth stuff like this, so you can leave a comment on that. And don't forget to subscribe. If you like this, please subscribe. You're going to help me a lot. And until next time, ifemerc, I love you guys. Before we go, I've used this environment to create like a visual effects shot, so that's going to be released before this tutorial video, so go and watch that. And yeah, I promise you really love it. And until next time, ifemerc, peace.